From KRQE News 13, your local election headquarters, this is a 2018 gubernatorial debate.
Good evening and welcome to the News 13 studio, your local election headquarters for this 2018 gubernatorial debate. And a welcome to our viewers in Las Cruces watching us this evening on KTSM TV. First of all, we would like very much to thank the candidates who are here. Republican Representative Steve Pearce and Democratic Representative Michelle Lujan Grisham. Thank you both for being here. A quick bio of each of our candidates tonight. Michelle Lujan Grisham was raised in Santa Fe. A lawyer, she has served as Secretary of Health, Bernalillo County Commissioner, and now three-term U.S. Representative from New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. Steve Pearce grew up in Hobbs. He is an Air Force veteran and a businessman. He was a state rep and now a 7-term U.S. Representative from New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. In fact, this is the very first time in our state's history that two sitting U.S. representatives have faced off for the governor's office. And before we start the ground rules, and there are very few in this debate, I will be asking the questions. There are no time limits, but we are encouraging the candidates to stay on point. I will step in to guide the conversation and to keep the topics flowing. Each candidate will get 90 seconds for closing statement. So, right into our opening question. You both have lived in the state of New Mexico for virtually your entire lives. You have both represented New Mexico in Congress for years now. What to you is the most pressing issue in our state? And by virtue of our coin toss, we start with Representative Pearce.
Sure, thank you, and thanks to KRQE tonight. And Dean, thank you for being the monitor for us tonight. There are 4 issues that really we have to take on simultaneously. Number 1, jobs and the economy. Number 2 is our education. Number 3 is poverty. And number 4 is the crime that we face across the state. And the reason I say simultaneously, because you can visualize that you're not going to fix education if you don't do something about poverty, if you don't do something about the dysfunctional families, about drugs, about gangs, and mental and behavior health. And so you've got to be working that poverty angle at the same time you're trying to fix education. If you don't work on the education, then you're not going to get the jobs. If you don't get the jobs, then the crime, your poverty are still going to escalate. And so you really must be attacking all 3 at once. But probably the thing that we need the most is we've got a good, resilient people. We have tremendous resources, but the greatest resources are our people. They're resilient, but a lot of times it feels like the spirit of the state has dissipated, that it is lagging. And so that build-up of the spirit of the people in their families, in their own individual lives, and then as they do that, they build up the spirit of their neighborhoods and of the state. This state can change its direction. We all want it to. We know the things that we should be at the top of, and we understand the things that we're bottom at that we should be better at. And we know what's wrong that we'd like to dissipate. But what's going to take us working together, united, Democrats, Republicans, all races, all cultures. We can do a lot to change New Mexico. That's why I'm running for governor, to do that.
All right, Representative Pearce, we thank you very much. Representative Lujan Grisham, the most pressing issue for our state.
I think that's public education. If we don't get public education right, we can't hold workers. We continue to lose our young people. They're going out of state for jobs. We have a terrible brain drain, and we don't recruit businesses to our state. So if you want to address the economy, the way that you do that is you make sure that every child in New Mexico has a productive, quality public education. It's one of the reasons, Dean, that I'm supported by all the major educational state unions and associations in the state, NEA and AFT. I'm also supported by 200 individual educators because we have a very detailed, specific plan about what you would do with education. And I want to give you 3 highlights quickly. 1, we have to invest in early education of pre-K. All the states that have done that have indicated and shown unequivocally that they they decrease dropout rates, they increase ready-to-work requirements, they get folks and kids ready to go to college and to succeed in higher education. 2, we got to respect and pay our teachers more and pay for their professional development. And we got to do something much different about high-stakes testing. I would get rid of Park, and I would change the way in which we are evaluating our educators.
All right, Representative Lujan Grisham, we thank you. We will get back to education, but I want to focus a little bit on economic development right now. Despite governors who for years have promised to turn our economy around and change the nature of our economy, we have for decades failed to get away from an economy that is largely dependent on the volatile oil and gas business, as well as government jobs. So the question is, what is the single most important thing that you would do that is brand new, that's not been tried before, that you think will boost the state's economy? Representative Pierce?
Sure. Again, I don't think there's a single most important thing. Number one, we have to understand that the state is very hostile to business, and so we have to overcome that hostility. And what does that hostility sound like? I visit business owners frequently. They say, the inspector just came today and the inspector said his job is to put me out of business. Well, that's what we face all the time. We could expand our economy somewhat, but in order to grow and diversify the economy, we need three separate columns. We need high tech. We don't want to continue to export the kids who are getting advanced degrees that want to go into research. The second column is the blue collar. 50% of our kids are not going to go to college, and 50% of the ones who do are not going to finish. And so those apprenticeship programs that we've been talking about in the entire race are dramatically important for those skilled trades that are in the blue collar system. And then we must have a rural economic development program. We have well-defined plans in one. The spaceport has got to be a very big piece of the expansion of the high tech. It's got enough scale nationwide. The space industry is about 304 or 5 billion. It's on the way to $1 trillion. There aren't many places where you can duplicate the size of the oil and gas. If you're going to diminish oil and gas, you have to grow the rest of the economy 5 and 6 times. And so you've got to have some scale available. So high-tech, spaceport, the national labs, again, the blue collars, we've talked about that. In the rural areas, I'd start cutting trees again. Our forests are burning instead of cutting trees. That used to be thousands of jobs. I would start a system of hydroponic greenhouses in our rural areas. I want New Mexico to be food self-sufficient, so I'm visualizing organic greenhouses where the schools are able to access locally grown foods, and our senior citizen centers have those. That would be hundreds of small businesses across New Mexico, would be a better efficient use of our water. So a lot of things that we can do to grow and diversify the economy.
All right, Mr. Pierce, thank you. Ms. Luan Grisham, I want you to be focused, if you can, the single most important thing that you would do to try to boost this economy.
Well, the single most important thing is diversify the economy. Well, I'm the only candidate that's got detailed plans to do two things. Jumpstart the economy by making sure that you are investing immediately in economic growth. So let's talk about that. One, you would increase the minimum wage, give 110,000 New Mexicans an immediate raise so they can afford food, their housing, prescription drugs, and supporting their families. So let's raise the minimum wage to $10. Let's get it to 12 in 4 years, and let's index it to inflation. Let's change the procurement code. Why are we sending all of our hard-earned money out of state? People ask me all the time about why Colorado and Arizona are doing so well, because they have our money. Let's change the procurement code and make sure that it's available to New Mexico businesses. Let's invest in infrastructure, and let's double the amount that we're spending in small businesses. We spend $50 million. We have the ability to spend $100 million on our small businesses. Now, here's the second part that's really important. You need to build New Mexico's economy. We have a 9-sector plan, which includes having 4 centers of excellence by making our universities the centers of economic development: bioscience, cybersecurity, renewable energy, and value-added ag. With those 9-sector strategies, we can diversify our economy. There's no reason New Mexico can't be the lead renewable energy state in the country.
All right, a simple yes or no question that affects families all across our state. Would you support a raise in the minimum wage? And you've said you would.
I'm on the record. Absolutely. 110,000 New Mexicans get an immediate raise. We know that the wage earnings for across the country, but right here in New Mexico, have been stagnant. It is the single most important factor in holding our families into poverty.
Ms. Luan Grisham, if I may, how high?
$10 immediately, and then I want to raise it to 12 and then index it to inflation so that you've got sustainable growth for minimum wage so that wages keep up with escalating inflation.
Okay. Mr. Pierce, a raise in the minimum wage?
Again, if we're trying to help the people at the bottom of the economic ladder, minimum wage actually does opposite that, so I would not support that. If you look at the study they did recently in Washington, they did a minimum wage there, and it's actually hurt the people at the bottom. People at the bottom of the economic ladder are now making less money and working less hours. And so if you want to help people, we need to grow the economy where there are more jobs out there who are attracting people. Now you're getting the rates bid up, and that's economically sustainable. The businesses that get hurt worse with a minimum wage increase of the small businesses. So we're going to penalize New Mexico-owned companies worse. Out-of-state companies, they can float the money in from other states. They can subsidize this operation. Small business owners, you're just going to put them out of business.
I might just mention, Steve, that most small businesses are at 10, and we are looking at living wages in many of our communities, including Doña Ana County, because we know that we're spending far more money supporting those families because they can't afford housing, they can't afford food, they can't afford any of those educational or professional development opportunities. It supports small business by making sure that they're spending their income right in these communities. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think it's really important to talk about it.
That's fine, but if you will, the small businesses who are talking to me say, please don't do it. They lobby heavily. Small businesses almost never come and talk to us. And if you look, poverty used to be transitory in America. Now then we're putting the standard so high that people can't get on the bottom rung. The minimum wage was never static. Now it is, because we put the wage so high, people can't get on the ladder. They crawl their way up the ladder once they get on. And so we've made poverty static in the country, and that's a great problem for us, and it's caused by these intense government regulations telling companies what they can pay. You can't pay more just because that you want to. Your bottom line has to sustain that. As a business, you have to be able to develop the margins that allow you to pay more. Everybody wants to keep their employees, but they can't do that with the government regulations saying you've got to pay for it. Sometimes we ship companies out of the nation, in fact, because of our wage requirements.
Wage inequality is such a significant issue, and what it does is it declares unequivocally that you're going to keep families in poverty, you're going to keep women in poverty, and you voted against every single minimum wage increase and when you were a state legislator and as a congressman, which means if we did it the way that you describe, people would still be making $4 and $5 an hour. It's not sustainable. And in fact, a recent study across the United States said that if you're not between $10 and $15 at a minimum wage, you cannot secure housing, which is unequivocally adding to the growing homeless epidemic, not only in our state, but all across the country. So I would respectfully disagree. And we've got several small businesses who are supporting us, who are very clear that a minimum wage increase is the right way to move New Mexico's economy as one strategy.
Mr. Pierce, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. And you're saying that I voted against every single minimum wage. That's because I've been in the private sector. You have not been out there fighting competition, trying to get products to market in the private market. You had a government contract. That is way different. So when I'm talking to, just please let me finish my thought if you would.
I will.
That it is possible for us to graduate the benefits down so people are getting benefits. We can stair-step benefits down, but we must be encouraging people to get back into the workforce. But if we don't do that, if we say that you're going to raise the minimum wage to a certain level, some companies can't afford that. They will either shut down or move offshore, and we don't want to be offshoring. We should be inviting companies back, and if we don't have people at a living wage, we should sustain them through the benefit programs.
But you
right
voted
now, if you're on
benefit
if you're on benefits right now, you lose those benefits when you hit $16,000, you lose $30,000 worth of benefits. Nothing keeps us from stair-stepping that down, as Governor will stair-step it, but we're going to help people get back into the workforce, and we're going to help companies be able to operate in New Mexico. New Mexico does not need to outsource more private companies. We do not. We cannot stand more government contracting. We have such a large amount of government presence.
When starting wages are higher in neighboring states, you are not making a good decision for your family. It's adding to the loss of our young people. We're just going to respectfully disagree. I know what it takes as a single mom to raise a family, and if you don't have a sustainable wage, you can't make the differences that you need for your family. And when you talk about, I'm not sure I quite understand it, but a ladder out of poverty, look, we have a poverty plan that's significant. It's got several strategies, 4 important ones, Dean. 1, we make sure that we deal with the cliff effect, which I think my opponent Steve has been trying to talk about, which is this, but you voted against that in Congress. Protecting people from a cliff effect is very simple. If you get a $200 raise and you're making minimum wage currently, for $200 you will lose approximately $600 in public benefits. What that translates to is single moms having to make a decision for a $200 raise and giving up child care assistance. That's not the decision that you want. You have to protect those benefits and support individuals by making sure they have a meaningful wage that can keep those benefits until they're stable enough, right, to move off of them. You want to protect them from predatory lenders. You want to make sure that we have a working families tax credit that puts about $500 back in the pockets of our hard-working, right, lower income New Mexicans and single parent households. These are the kinds of investments that can really make a difference, including raising the minimum wage. 110,000 New Mexicans will be better off and more stable as a result.
Ms. Llewellyn-Grisham, I thank you. I do want to move on, but I would like to give you the last word.
Yeah.
Mr.
Sure.
Pierce.
Just, again, we'll have to respectfully disagree. When I got my first job, I didn't make minimum wage because it wasn't worth it. And by climbing the ladder, I meant that pretty soon I went across the street and got another one. By the way, my first job was at 9. I was outside the home. I worked inside before then. But you go across the street and you get a job over there, and then somebody says, well, you've developed pretty good skills. If you'll come across the street, I'll pay you more. That's what's happening in the oil and gas field right now. So we don't have a minimum wage there, and yet the entry is probably $100,000 right now for basic skills. $35 an hour. One of the companies told me the other day they can't find people to drive a pickup for $35 an hour. That's what happens when you build the economy, when you grow jobs. That's the central piece of our plan. You must grow the jobs to where people are demanded more. When they're demanded more, they're going to be offered more. That's the way to grow an economy and increase the wage. Minimum wage as a prescription from government will not work.
Okay, Mr. Pierce, we're going to leave it there. I thank you. I'd like to move on to education now. And the state recently lost a lawsuit with the courts ruling that the state's $2.4 billion education budget does not adequately fund public education K through 12 in our state. So the first question, and it's very straightforward, are we spending enough on public education in New Mexico?
Clearly not. This court decision, as you refer to, Yazzie, was brought by a minority student who was clearly not getting the dedicated resources for a quality public education. Now, the last 8 years of the Martinez administration, which by the way is the very same Tea Party Republican agenda in Congress, which is to starve public education and to privatize it.
So you don't think we spend enough on education?
There's no question. I'm not alone in that. I have a court decision that says unequivocally we aren't.
Let me get to Mr. Pierce, please.
Sure, I would agree with the courts that we don't spend enough on education, but the problem is, where are you going to come up with the extra money? Now, we have a little bit of budget surplus right now. Maybe we have a lot of budget surplus. But always in the legislature, you must be able to adjust the figures to where it fits your budget. We're not allowed to run a deficit spending in the state, and therefore, if you give more to education, you're going to take away from other programs, and you will have people lobbying on that. That's the very difficult thing. Yes, it's easy to say we don't pay our teachers enough, that we don't have the money in the budget, but where are we going to get it and where are we going to sustain it? So this surplus that we have right now, $1.2 billion, people are going to want to spend that in recurring funds. But I will tell you, oil and gas is very volatile, and that 1.2 could disappear. We could have obligated it, and then we have to claw back exactly like we were doing the last couple of years. My opponent has a plan to shut the oil and gas industry down. She said that she would regulate the fracking. That's $600 million. How can you say we're going to spend more money on education when you're taking money away from education? So those are the questions you have to answer.
Right. I don't know that I understood enough of that, but I'm going to try. I certainly have not done anything that would indicate that we're not going to have an all-of-the-above energy approach. And the notion that oil and gas can't survive when you also do renewable energy is false. In fact, it's ludicrous. Look at states around us. Colorado has a robust oil and gas industry, and they have a robust renewable energy portfolio. Ours should and could be and will be better. But here's the situation. If you're saying that if you don't have sufficient resources, that you just ignore leadership and vision and diversifying the economy and making sure that you're growing that economy, and as an end result, you're forced to cut education, then you're right back to violating the constitutional requirement that you would give our kids a solid public quality education. But worse than that, we're denying our kids any kind of a real future in this state. And I want to be really clear that my opponent, when he was a state legislator, cut $300 million out of public education, and as a congressman has voted to take about $145 billion out of education. So you can say that you think we are not spending enough, but you've done everything you can in positions of policymaking to reduce the amount that we're spending on public education, which is the reason why New Mexico is 50th in the country. You lead, you diversify the economy, and you make sure that you use the resources that are readily available to you to make sure that you can fund a robust public education system, which should include the land grant permanent.
Okay, I'd like to move on to pre-K, but please,
follow up,
please.
sir. My opponent said that she didn't understand one of the comments that I made, and so I would just ask her. I've heard you say that you would regulate fracking, which is going to take roughly $600 million out of the oil and gas industry that comes to the state, and I've heard you say that you wouldn't regulate it. So maybe you can help me out. Will you or will you not regulate the fracking?
So if you mean I'm going to hold oil and gas companies accountable and
No,
make
that's
sure,
not the question. Will you regulate fracking?
I don't even know what regulate fracking means. Here's the
means you
issue.
would
It
shut
means
it
I'm
down.
not going to let fracking at Chaco. I don't think that we should expand it to sacred sites. I don't think that we should engage in fracking in Santa Fe. I think that where we're doing fracking currently is showing that we have one of the largest oil reserves in the world, not just in the country, in the Permian Basin. We've got incredible investments there. Here's what I'm interested in doing, making sure that oil and gas is participating in infrastructure rebuilding. You have some of the most unsafe roads in the state, in the counties that you represent as a congressman. 2, I want to make sure that we're doing methane mitigation. Colorado's another great example where we're doing methane mitigation, which brings tens of millions of dollars into the state revenue source. It actually reduces our carbon emissions and greenhouse gases, which are bad for the planet, and we've got to do something about that. That has nothing to do with what you say I've said about fracking. Fracking is a horizontal drilling method that allows us to recover now oil and gas in ways that we couldn't before, that has been in New Mexico for more than 60 years and is already present, particularly in Lee and Eddy County. And I've said nothing about making sure that we can't have an all of the above energy approach.
If I could make comment, I would say that horizontal drilling has not been. Fracking is not horizontal drilling. You're talking to somebody who made my living in the business. Horizontal drilling is a very new technology, and it is facilitated by the fracking that occurs after the well is drilled. And so just understand that when you tell companies that you're going to regulate fracking, they're going to choose to be in Texas. That's what's happening right now. We got 400 rigs running right across the border in Texas, and we have 100 running here. The estimate is that each rig not running here is costing us $1 million a year, and so by you saying that you're going to regulate fracking, you're going to push the development across the state line, and then we're going to decrease. So we're missing about $300 million revenue annually because of the rigs not running here. You would force that
when you
into
say
the Texas
not
side.
running here, you
In
mean
New
that you're
Mexico.
interested in oil and gas in places like Chaco Canyon and Santa Fe, and I would not support increasing that footprint. Look, if you don't diversify the economy, then you said it yourself. You have a boom and bust economy. It doesn't work for New Mexico. We have to do all of the above, and I disagree with your long-standing approach that climate change is real. It is real, and we have to address it.
Ms. Ellen, thank you. I'd like to move on because we have so many topics we'd like to cover. One, going back to education here, of course, this has been in the news, hotly debated across our state. There is this push in the legislature to tap the permanent fund further to expand pre-K all across our state. Some say this is the best chance that we have to lift an entire generation out of poverty. Others say this is a fiscally irresponsible thing to go deeper into the permanent fund. Mr. Pierce, as governor, would you support tapping the permanent fund for expanding pre-K?
Well, let's look at the idea. I was in the legislature and have been very involved in the discussion when we went to the K, and that was going to be the solution for education. Now then we have it, and now then it's going to be something else as a solution to education. Let me be clear, our education system is not working. and it can be fixed, but we need to set about fixing it. So I've talked to early education specialists, and they say if we get the reading, if we get literacy, I was just in a school this last week, they get 83% literacy in a kind of a very difficult student population. And still they say by the second or third year in our public schools that literacy is going to dissipate. So I think that we need to fix what we're working on now before we go and expand tremendously. But then the idea that we're going to dip into the permanent fund, it's the rainy day fund, and people are saying, well, it's raining right now. So let me get this straight. My opponent is going to hand over the permanent fund to the people who are causing it to rain. They're mismanaging our budget at the current point, and so we're going to give them even more. I think that we should be fiscally responsible. I think that we should understand that that fund is for when we're out of oil and gas completely. If we spend it up now, if we begin to empty it, and the SIC Council has said we're emptying that fund at a rate that it will not be here 40 years from now, and if we empty that, then when we're out of oil and gas, we're going to start shutting down schools and laying off teachers. I don't think that's a good long-term plan. So I would say that let's fix our education system as it stands. Let's continue the early education programs that we have going right now. And as we get the budget, as we have a sustainable budget, as we diversify, grow the economy, then we can look at expanding into more early childhood education than we have now. But to dip into the permanent fund is very risky financially for the state.
Okay, you in fact doubt the benefit, the long-term benefit of
The
pre-K.
long-term benefit is something we have to look at.
Ms.
Well,
Lowengress.
let's do the long-term benefit first. For every dollar you spend on early childhood education, you get $7 returned. It is a very prudent investment, not only in a solid quality education that makes sure that our students can and will succeed, but it returns real money back to the state and back to our economy. And I don't understand the notion that we're dipping into a permanent fund. The land grant permanent fund has $17 billion, and the proposal that I would make, which mirrors in large part many of the legislative efforts, which is to increase the percentage of the interest that we are already investing in our public education system. This allows us to hire and train more early childhood education teachers, make sure our children are ready to learn by the time they go to kindergarten, and make sure that we're spending far less in healthcare costs. They're higher wage earners, they're able to ready to go to work, they can go to college. Every state that has a successful quality public education system is investing in early childhood education. You can't be serious about a quality education, about improving the economy and diminishing poverty if we're not investing in early childhood education.
Ms. Lillian-Grisham,
Yeah.
I thank you. I have a question I think is much more direct and clear, perhaps. We have this history in our state of promoting kids throughout grades, even when they're at times not reading at grade level. Do you support social promotion?
I think that even is the wrong question. I think what we should have is that we want to have kids that are performing to grade level regardless. So I'm suggesting that we would begin to read with every kid an hour a day, K through 3. I don't want to wait till the third grade to see if we didn't reach grade level. By the third grade, kids are already stigmatized in their own mind and in the minds of the education establishment. I think about my older brother Tom. He never really cared about school. He just went, and the system just tried to crush him. So let's get kids reading to grade level right off the bat. I think that's fairly easy to do. One of the ways that we would do it is with a lot of volunteers, and I'm saying just publicly, that if you're on public assistance, if you're on Medicaid, I would have a work requirement for you. We would do it with a full heart. We would give you training. We would help you get back on your feet, but we'll have a work requirement. But if you have kids in school, your work requirement is going to be to go to school and volunteer with your kid and other kids to read. So there is no reason that we don't have someone to read with every single kid, and I think that we can reach a grade level with everyone. So the idea that we would wait and give social promotions or hold people back is one that to me says that the education system is not working right properly. So let's make the system work properly for all the kids, leave nobody behind. I don't even think we have to deal with social promotion.
Mr. Pearsall, I would like an answer. I'm talking about when you have the circumstance, you're in third grade, you're not reading at the fourth grade level, social promotion means that child gets advanced. Do you support that or not?
I understand what you mean.
You're saying let's just avoid that and not let it happen, but it's happening now.
I say that you give the attention to the kids. If you give individual attention, I just don't think there are many kids who can't learn to read. I think that we can get them all reading, and that's what we'll insist on, not at the 3rd grade, but at the kindergarten and 1st grade level, and then we sustain it through the rest of the years in school.
And for that one who doesn't make it?
You're just saying that there are people out there who can't learn.
Well,
that's what our education system is saying today, that those kids on that side of town can't learn to read. And I'm saying that that is totally false. I think that every kid has inside of them the ability to really skyrocket, to shine, to learn everything, and you're postulating differently. I would simply disagree with your basic assumption.
I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I'm also suggesting that maybe in your first year of governor, if you're governor, if you're not able to turn it around in 1 year, you will have to make this choice about whether we promote kids who are already in 2nd grade when you become governor, and then you will have a choice about that. So it's not a strange sort of bizarre made-up question. These kids exist; they're out there. That machine doesn't turn on a dime. So the question is how you feel about those kids.
Again, I just think that if you take a look at individual attention, I was down in the school where they have kids with learning disabilities. They're 3 through 5. They have 83% literacy rate across the board. If you can do that there, you can do it everywhere. I just don't accept the idea of failure.
Okay.
And if we have teachers who can't reach the level, then we maybe should talk to the teachers and increase their capabilities. But to sit here and say that we're going to choose social promotion or not social promotion, we're going to fail or not, I just think is the wrong basis to have your education on.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Lowen-Grissom, social promotion.
Social promotion is a really bad label, so I'm going to agree with Steve that that's not something we should be
I'm going to mark this
attempting
down.
to
We
do.
have agreement here.
That's right.
Okay.
However, I disagree entirely about where we are with public education. If you want to make sure that we're giving kids the ability to close those achievement gaps, which include reading levels in grade 3, any grade level, then you got to do early childhood education. You have to have smaller classrooms. You've got to make sure that you've got a robust funding system for public education, and you cannot say now that you realize that there's not sufficient funding for public education but have a record of removing those very same investments. And the notion that volunteers and Medicaid recipients who already have full-time jobs, who are trying to support their families, can read to kids without training and expertise, that in and of itself solves our education problem, I think is very short-sighted. Look, if we've got folks who can pass a background check, that aren't going to create safety issues in our schools, who are interested in supporting our classrooms, I haven't met an educator who's not willing to have that support in the classroom. But what they really need is evidence-based tools to make sure that we're meeting the needs and achieving addressing our achievement gaps by our students. And we aren't spending money on that, which is why I have a detailed public education plan that is endorsed and supported by hundreds of educators in the state that uses evidence-based efforts, including this. You need to have a community school design, which brings the very social services to at-risk kids to those schools so that you're navigating, food security, health care, housing, you're minimizing adverse childhood experiences. When kids have those things addressed, they're much better able, to close those achievement gaps and to focus on learning. Teachers need more time teaching, less time testing. That's why I'm going to do away with the PARCC test.
Yeah,
briefly, please.
Sure. Let me refer to the Center for Health Policy, Dr. Gabriel Sanchez, and he's the one that said simply reading to kids an hour a day will increase the literacy dramatically. So when I'm at these schools, K through 3, and I visit schools a lot, and I'm at the schools and I suggest that, actually it's the teachers who say, we would love it. We would love to get parental involvement. They say there is no single thing that will improve education like parental involvement. They say that we in schools, that they as teachers cannot overcome the deficiencies of the home. And if we will get the parent involved, that will be the single biggest determinant of educational outcomes. So when my opponent says it's ludicrous, maybe she should be talking to some of the people out there. Maybe she should be talking to the educators who are saying it's a magnificent idea. One lady who said she would qualify, that she didn't have a job, that she was on public assistance. She said, you'll actually get 2 for 1. She said, I didn't learn to read very well myself. So the idea that we would begin to help people build their skill sets and get out of poverty on their own is one that comes natural to me. I'm sorry, it doesn't come natural to my opponent.
I'd like to shift the discussion now to an issue that's important to a lot of New Mexicans, and that is crime. And I have something of a personal question. Have either of you ever been a victim of a crime here in New Mexico? And if you have, would you share with us what that experience was?
No.
Yes.
Have not?
Yes, have.
Tell us about
Have a grandchild that was carjacked, had a car taken away at gunpoint. I've been burglarized since I've been a resident of Albuquerque 4 times, 2 recently and 2 decades ago.
Well, let me ask you this then. As governor, what would be the single most important thing that you would do? And I know it's a complicated issue, but the single most important thing that you would do that you think would make New Mexicans safer?
We need more law enforcement officers, and we need much better collaboration. We've released a very detailed crime plan, and I know that you want me to be brief, so Dean and I will do that. Look, tough, smart, safe. But the fact that we don't collaborate between our different law enforcement jurisdictions means that we don't share intelligence information. So the folks that are engaged in nefarious activity, right, human trafficking, drugs, auto theft, and property crimes, if we don't share that information and go after those bad actors and hold them accountable, we just keep repeating the same problems. We need more law enforcement officers. We need much better collaboration. We got to be tough, smart, and safe.
Okay, Mr. Pierce, the single most important thing that you would do to make New Mexicans safer?
Sure. You hold convicted criminals who threaten society in jail. Now, my opponent has said to the ACLU that she would support the Senate bill that would turn everyone loose at 30 years. Now, to me, that says that some people haven't been rehabilitated. In fact, the people in our justice system say that some people are not able to be rehabilitated, and so we're going to be putting them back. Our judges will tell us that we just have not enough cells, and so we just have to turn people loose. So one thing I would do in order to keep the cell space available for people who are a danger to society is I would stop recycling. I would stop sending people back. If we get them a job and a place to live, then the statistics show that not as many will go back. That gives us jail cells available there. So, and we've already started the HOPE program in the South Valley that helps people find a place to live and a job. But then the second big thing that we can do to have available cell space in our jails is to take the mental and behavioral health problems out. We are warehousing our mental and behavioral health people in our jails right now. It is extraordinarily expensive. Treatment is much less expensive. So this is one of the ways that we as a state are not spending our dollars well, and we can do it better. And think about the lives that then are saved and live better because we're giving mental and behavioral health to people who really need that rather than incarceration. So I think those are two ways.
Let's talk about that, Dean, if you don't mind.
Let me personalize this, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this personal, and maybe, and you've hinted at maybe your answer for this one, but say you have someone who's addicted to methamphetamine. Mm-hmm. They are a property crime criminal. They've been in and out of jail. They've been convicted. Mm-hmm. They've been in and out of rehab. Not a violent offender, but someone who has a long criminal record. They get caught stealing a car. They are convicted of that crime. What do we do with that person?
So you've raised a very significant issue, which is we have a drug epidemic in this country. We have an opioid crisis in this country. And I want to point out that Medicaid is a very important tool, as is holding all of our private insurance programs and benefits. They have to have parity for mental health. So we've been living through 8 years of the Martinez administration, which cut 100% of those Medicaid behavioral health programs. So we've lost 8 years of those investments. My opponent has voted for the extreme Republican repeal the Affordable Care Act and do the Trump health care plan, which same thing, takes away 3 Medicaid benefits and health care benefits to 300,000 New Mexicans. If you are serious about doing behavioral health therapy and treatment, using evidence-based treatment, putting school-based health centers in, making sure that we're not using jails and prisons as our behavioral health treatment centers, then you have to use every tool in the toolbox, including Medicaid. In addition, I have voted for every opioid budget proposal and appropriation in Congress, and the current administration is not leveraging any of those investments. We have to have all of those investments to have a robust, comprehensive behavioral health treatment program. I was successful with that at the Department of Health. I'll be successful with that as governor.
Mr. Pierce, what do you do with my hypothetical?
Sure. First of all, Dean, I would probably disagree that that your methamphetamines are just out there on meth. They are some of the most violent of all. In fact, when I talk to people who work with drug addiction, when I talk to the people who are running the CYFD, the foster kid system, they say that it's the people on methamphetamines who are selling their kids into sexual acts at 7 and 8 and 9 years old to pay for the methamphetamine habit. So if you used a different example, fine, we could talk about it, but meth is extraordinarily dangerous and it is very hard to get off of. If you get on heroin, you probably have a 40% chance to get off. You get on methamphetamines, maybe 10% chance to get off. And people who have gotten off meth said it will cause you to do crazy things.
So what do you do with this repeat offender? Let's make it heroin then. Someone who's addicted to opioids, who's committing crimes in our community.
You should be getting treatment for them. Again, I like the heroin suggestion better. Heroin calms
Understood.
them down. Methamphetamines, that should be a question all its own. But the heroin, absolutely. I think we should be looking at more treatment programs. We should be having those in the jail system itself. And when people are out, we should be identifying them sooner. We should be offering people a way to get out. There are a lot of faith-based programs in the South Valley that really people are just trying to help their neighbors get out of problems, and I think the government should be there. I think we have a moral responsibility as a government to help people reclaim lives that typically have been given up on by society.
Okay.
I don't think we should give up.
But you have to use evidence-based approaches, and the notion that we'll have better success with heroin or better success with and less success with meth, whatever that addiction is, you need drug courts, you need DWI courts, you need serious behavioral health interventions. We need to make sure that the 28-day model that was created by insurance companies, we cannot do that. It's not evidence-based. You got to do much more prevention. And you got to hold bad actors accountable, which means including holding pharmaceutical companies that have been overprescribing and overselling opioids, because it's that opioid addiction that often then gets you right into cheaper alternatives, which is
happening
meth
now in our
and
state,
heroin. It's happening all over the state.
On the issue of addiction and drugs, a lot of discussion about recreational marijuana in this country. 9 states now have made marijuana recreationally legal. That includes the entire West Coast. You've got Nevada, and here more close to home, we've got our neighbors to the north, Colorado. Mm-hmm. First of all, I'd like to ask you just personally, have either of you smoked pot? And if you have, would you care to share that experience with us?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't.
All right. So the question becomes, as governor,
mm-hmm.
do we move in this direction? Do you make recreational marijuana legal in the state of New Mexico? Mr. Pierce?
Sure. The first question is that people want to know is, where do you stand on the medicinal marijuana? I was suspicious of that for many years, but I've got friends who I've known my whole life, and they will tell me what it's done for them. So I have come to terms that medical marijuana, fine, we will do it. There maybe should be more oversight. That I hear from a lot of the providers themselves, that the system has pieces in it that should be looked at more closely, and I'm happy to do that. But the recreational, when I say that we've got to cure poverty, when we've got to cure mental and behavioral health and drug addiction, opioid addiction, all of those kind of merge together, I do not see how putting one more obstacle in front of people helps them to get out of poverty and get back on their feet. I really don't. So I've never been supportive of legalizing recreational marijuana, and I don't see as governor that it would do that. I think it's so important that we help people get back to being self-sufficient. 930,000 by the last estimate of people in New Mexico out of 2 million. Almost 1 out of every 2 is caught in some sort of a thing they can't get out of. They're on Medicaid, and they just need some help. And I think the government should be helping them get back on their feet, help them get a better job, better skills, or whatever it is. And so let's work to lift people up. I just don't think that the recreational marijuana is going to do that.
Ms. Lundgren?
Well, the states that have gone to recreational marijuana have been really clear, right, that it's an economic boost for their states. I think the benefit that New Mexico has with the 9 states that have legalized recreational marijuana is that we can learn from their successes and their mistakes. Now, I led the effort in New Mexico to bring medical cannabis. I was clear then that it is not a gateway drug, that it is a very powerful tool for a variety of serious medical conditions. This current governor's done everything she can to minimize access and make it very difficult to obtain both a license to produce and to get access as a patient. My opponent has repeatedly voted against having veterans get access to medical cannabis, so it's not quite there in supporting medical cannabis. Here's what I expect from the New Mexico legislature when it comes to recreational cannabis. If I get a bill on my desk that protects the medical cannabis program, so make sure that patients don't lose any of their access to the products that they need. 2, deals with workplace intoxication and public safety, deals with underage consumption and prevention, and regulates productively edibles, which can get in the hands of underage users, then I'm inclined to sign that bill. That would put New Mexico in a lead position to get recreational cannabis right and could bring hundreds of millions of dollars to the New Mexico's economy.
Before we leave the discussion, though, that
Yes,
we should point out that the studies in the schools in the states, especially Colorado, indicate a lessening performance. You have higher people driving under influence, so you have a lot of problems that are beginning to manifest themselves. You have younger kids taking it. And the one woman who just came back from one of the states, she moved her family back to here. She said, how dare we as a state have a question that us parents, we're trying to solve that. She said, my kids are 13 or 14, they're just in the early teen years. And she says, how dare you put an obstacle in front of me trying to graze my family correctly? And so if we're going to consider it, I think we should go up to Raton. And Raton gets a lot of the bleed over from Colorado. Up there, they have a very definite opinion about recreational marijuana because they get to see the problems come to them for solution. So before we say that, yes, it's going to work fine for New Mexico, it's going to be this great economic boom for us, I really think that we should look at some of the downsides.
Okay, a clear distinction then on the issue of,
but
recreational
absolutely,
marijuana.
Colorado and the other states prematurely, didn't address the very issues that I identified that New Mexico can do better than those other states. And to minimize that as an economic driver doesn't make any sense if you get a complete package from the legislature.
It is hard in this political environment during a debate not to ask this question. What do you think about President Trump?
I think the same thing about him that I think about President Bush or President Obama before him. They're simply men, they're simply people who are tasked to do a job, and when they're right, I'll support them. When they're wrong, then I will contend with them, usually not very publicly. I didn't agree with President Obama on a lot, but we also never really took on the issues in public. We actually worked well with his agencies. President Bush, again, I disagreed with him on several things. I can remember the morning he called the house and Cynthia picked up the phone at about 7 a.m. and said, Mr. President, he was trying to get me to go along with an amnesty plan that I felt was completely unfair to people who are trying to come to the country legally, and I simply declined. And so I will support people when they're right, and I will contend with them when they're wrong. Now, President Trump, I've contended with him pretty earnestly. I was one of the ones who kept his first health care bill from passing. He came to me and said, I need your vote. And I said, fine, sir, I'm not going to give it to you because you have a very flawed product. It is not good for New Mexico, and it should be taken back and rewritten. That's eventually what happened, but he tweeted out that night he was going to run somebody against me in the primary, and the press was all calling, well, what do you think about that? I said, I don't know. People have been trying to knock me off for 6 or 7 year terms. If he wants to, that's fine. I think I'll be fine in shape. We also took him on over the wall. I think we should secure the southern border, don't get me wrong, but I do not think the wall is it. You asked me what I think and how I get along with him. Those are some of the key issues.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pierce? Ms. Lujan Grisham? President Trump.
President Trump has initiated policies that are a disaster for New Mexicans. Let's talk about 3. He's asked Republicans in Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which my opponent has voted on countless times. He supported the Trump health care plan, which would knock 300,000 New Mexicans off health care. The Trump tax package puts us $2 trillion in debt, only supports 83% of the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest 1% individuals, and on the backs of making insecure the benefits like Social Security, veterans, Medicare, Medicaid. These are policies, and that's before I get to really harsh immigration policies. He's worked to limit legal immigration in this country.
Since you bring up immigration, I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about that. We are a border state. This is a question that is very important to a lot of New Mexicans. And I know it's complicated, and there's been a sort of backlog of issue with this because Congress has not acted for a lot of years on this, on some of the issues that are outstanding. So the question is, should immigrants found living in New Mexico illegally be deported?
We have 11 million people undocumented in this country. We have thousands. We've got 1.6 million dreamers these are children who have been brought to this country no fault of their own, who have been incredible, right, in our communities. There are nurses and doctors and lawyers. 20,000 educators are dreamers. We should do everything in our power to make sure that dreamers are protected, that we do comprehensive legal immigration reform, that we're clear about asylum and refugee. This has been the most discriminatory, racist White House I've seen in my lifetime. And they are preventing any meaningful work by members of Congress on comprehensive immigration reform. If we don't do that, right, and we don't secure the border, we aren't doing anything to make sure that we deal with this problem sufficiently or constitutionally.
Okay, Mr. Pierce, the same question. People found living illegally in New Mexico, should they be deported?
We've been very clear since I got into office that that we need to solve the immigration question, and that's kind of the third step. That would be the third question in solving the immigration question. First of all, we should secure the border. If we were to either do anything with regard to people who are here without documentation, then tomorrow it starts reoccurring again. That's the problem that President Reagan ran into. So secure the border first, and I don't think the wall is going to be that. We need a virtual wall in some places. Secondly, fix legal immigration, because our office helps a lot of people who are trying to come here, trying to unthread problems from the past, and we help that. So let's fix the system so that it doesn't take 10 or 12 years. Thirdly, then you have a fixed pool of people. I would simply ask one question, and I would not deport, whatever, but the question is, do you want to be a citizen or not? If you don't, then let's get onto a work program. Let's get you signed up. Don't work for cash, work for pay. If you want to be a citizen, then you got to go through the regular process. If we give you unfair advantage, then we simply let you take advantage of those people following the law to come here correctly. It's unfair. Now, I would say that my opponent said there was no meaningful attempt on the immigration. I've been in Congress 7 terms and have been pushing for immigration reform since my first term there. It has never come so close as we had 2 votes this year. Now, my opponent had been grandstanding. She had been using things to bring attention to the fact, but when it actually came to the floor and the president gave a tremendous amount of ground, the initial suggestion was take the DACA recipients. That was only about 1/3 of the people who qualified for the DACA program. Many wouldn't sign up. My opponent voted no on that bill. I just didn't understand it, because the president said we will take the president said we will take all the DACA recipients, and my opponent said no, nothing. It's either a whole my way or no way, and we're not going to move there.
I think it's important, though, in that situation, it's not understood, is that my opponent has a bill to protect dreamers, but it doesn't. He's the only member of Congress on that bill. 23 Republicans got on what we call a discharge petition, which would give us a meaningful vote on fair protection to dreamers and border security, the USA Act, which is a bill that I helped craft and got 50 Republicans on board. And Senator McCain, prior to his death, took that exact bill, the USA Act, and introduced it in the Senate. It is probably one of the best efforts at bipartisan immigration work in Congress, and the president did everything in his power to derail that, because what he wants is a $35 billion wall, and he's holding dreamers and other individuals hostage in that design.
Okay, we're going to leave that topic there. Thank you, Ms. Lujan Grisham. The question I have now, the attack ads as we get closer to Election Day are intensifying. Tell us about something that you have seen in an attack ad that is aimed at you that you thought was below the belt.
Well, I don't know if anything is below the belt. It was totally untrue. When they reported that something we sold our company for more than it's worth or whatever, that was a charge that was proved false 8 or 10 years ago, and you simply shrug it off. It's a part of politics. You can't get it pulled down because people want they have a right to run what they want to say.
Okay.
So it's not such a matter of that, but that was totally untrue. And the stance that it describes, when it describes that somehow I'm in the pocket of oil and gas, oil and gas is 35% of our economy here. My opponent has taken oil and gas money, and so you shrug it off. It's a part of the system.
All right, and you're both experienced Congress people. Tell me what you thought was below the belt in terms of attack ads.
Well, I want to do one thing to clarify. The attack ad about oil and gas that Mr. Pierce references are by independent expenditures, which basically means I'm not doing that attack out of my campaign. I've run a positive campaign. The reverse of that is my opponent has directly attacked me, and it's a ludicrous ad. And if you believe the false allegations about our healthcare advocacy work, then you believe that Trump really did have the largest inauguration crowd in the history of any other president. It's what we like to refer to as alternative facts. That was debunked when my primary opponents tried to use that. The Santa Fe New Mexican and other valid news sources have identified that Delta's a patient advocacy company that did an effective job supporting the high-risk pool, and that none of those allegations in that ad are in fact true.
Okay, we could probably go on much longer about this. Let me move on. Every candidate talks about how much they love the state of New Mexico. Sort of a personal question. Describe for our viewers tonight during this debate, if you had a weekend to spend anywhere in the state of New Mexico, and if you could be brief, that would be great, because we have a couple more things to cover, including closing comments. Where would you spend your staycation, Mr. Pierce?
I'll tell you, the state has got such dramatic vistas and scenic views. I love the trip out to Gallup with the red sandstone cliffs. But I tell you, if I were going to spend it anywhere, it'd probably be on that drive from Santa Fe up to Chama. You just got all of the views there that all of our painters at the Taos Colony they were capturing that. And to me, that's the fascinating part of New Mexico.
O'Keefe country, and having lived in Chama, I know that area pretty well. So
that is a tough question. There is I just got done from a 9-day, 33 county, 80 city tour for our campaign, and I was struck again by the incredible beauty. We aren't doing enough for our outdoor and tourism economy in the state. I'm dedicated to doing that, but I'll tell you, one of my favorite spots in the state has always been White Sands. My disabled sister went to school in Alamogordo, and I spent a lot of time as a child.
Along with a lot of people in love with that part of our state. We are nearing the end of our debate now. We'd like to offer each of our candidates a minute and a half to make the case to their viewers for why they should be New Mexico's next governor. And by virtue of a coin toss, Mr. Pierce will get the final word. So we start right now with Representative Lujan Grisham. Your final thoughts.
Thank you. I want to thank KRQE for hosting this incredible debate, and I want to thank you, Dean, for being an effective moderator tonight. I know that that's a tough job. You ended the debate with talking about our favorite places in New Mexico. Look, this is a state that I love. I am so honored and proud to be in a position to run for governor. This is a job that's going to take real skill, leadership, and vision. I'm ready to bring New Mexico to a brighter future, right? We need a governor who's ready to fight not just for the land of enchantment, but for the land of opportunity, of renewable energy, of quality and affordable health care, and of a diverse and sustainable economy. I see a state that has far more potential than it has liabilities, and I'm willing to make every single investment to do that and to fight for every single New Mexican. In contrast, my opponent has a long track record of voting against every single investment, privatizing Social Security, privatizing and voucherizing Medicare and public education, not voting for any apprenticeships or training programs for students. It's time that we have a governor with a demonstrated experience, demonstrated leadership, who's ready to fight for every single New Mexican for a brighter, sustainable future. I hope after tonight you believe that I'm that person. I'm lucky to be in an environment to be running for governor.
All right, Ms. Lujan Grisham, we thank you. Mr. Pierce?
Thanks, Dean, and thanks to KRQE for hosting this event tonight. I think you can see that there are two distinct choices. One of the two candidates, my opponent, would take on policies that would bankrupt the state within a matter of years. Even the Albuquerque Journal said she had no plan for the retirement accounts that are the retirements here in New Mexico that are so important, but also in her regulation of the oil and gas industry. She is going to put in controls that will cause that industry to shut down. That risks us losing $600 million into our education. She claims that the tax bill is not working yet. It's New Mexicans who are telling me that I got more money in my account. I have more money to spend since you did that tax cut. She said that it's not helping at all. The truth is that our economy is growing better and more vibrantly than it has in decades. Unemployment is lower. and it's lower among the groups that we want it to be lower in, our Hispanics, Black population. We're seeing record low unemployments. So my business background says that yes, I can create the jobs, I can diversify and grow the economy. My experience in the legislature actually balancing the books in the appropriating committee say that we can reach a balanced budget using the funds that we have available to us. We don't have to rob from the future, and every New Mexican will have opportunity to succeed under Governor Pierce. So I'm humbly asking for your vote tonight. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Pierce, thank you. Thank you to both of our candidates. Thank you for watching tonight. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Have a great night. Remember to vote.